Hey everyone, my name is Bryn Casey, and today we are joined with a very special guest, Dara Brown, who is a news anchor at News 12 and worked as an anchor and senior producer at MSNBC. Dara, thank you so much for joining us today. We are so happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. So as college students, I think we're all interested to hear about your experience at NYU. And I know you were a broadcast journalism major, so if you could talk about your experience and how that prepared you for your career.
Absolutely. I was broadcast journalism, which is pretty unique sometimes when you're going off to college. You don't always know what you want to do.
Yes.
But in high school, I had been a co-editor for my school newspaper.
Oh.
And it was really journalism and writing what I wanted to do. So jumped in at NYU, and luckily NYU is a very hands-on teaching school. So I think first class freshman year was, hey, here's the equipment, go. And we had New York City as pretty much our background for anything we needed. So it was very good, and we had a lot of working professors come in and teach us, and we also had staff. So if we needed help, we could always go to an editor or a producer or the head of the department, and they were very helpful.
That's such a good location to be in for this industry and such a great environment. And I'm curious because I know you started off as a childhood actor, which is super cool, but what made you want to transition into news broadcasting?
Transition is an interesting word for that, because I always wanted to be a broadcast journalist.
Really? Okay.
In fact, I'm doing shows, and every time they would interview me, they would say, "Hey, what is it you would really like to do?" And it was, "Oh, I just want to be a newscaster."
Wow.
So
okay.
I have interviews back to when I was 13, starring in Annie in Detroit, actually. And they asked me, CNBC Canada was doing an interview, and it's on tape. I want to be a journalist when I grow up. That's what I want to do. So it worked out well, because when I was in the business, I still kind of feel I'm in the business, but so much of what I ended up doing as an adult, because I used to do tours and I was always on the road and traveling, but college really settled me back into New York, where I couldn't go away because I wanted to finish school.
Yes.
So I started doing more voiceovers and getting into more behind the scenes. And I don't know if you guys would have remembered it, but infomercials came out. And we had a lot of corporations doing videos for their in-house productions, which had not really existed before. So I moved into doing that and ended up getting very frustrated because I would rewrite the copy. I didn't like the way they were speaking. I didn't think it was conversational. They would use words and things just didn't make sense. And that's when I realized I needed to hop back into journalism. Okay, but I had already had all the training with prompters and with lighting and with everything else. So it kind of came together at a perfect time.
Gotcha. You have so much experience on both sides of production. So how do those skills cross over? And is it important in this industry to, even if you want to be an anchor, be familiar with production and writing in the background?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And my guidance to you and to all of you is get your hands on everything and try everything. Work in the edit room, sit in the director's chair, watch people, find somebody that you think is very good at what they're doing and shadow them. Ask if they can be your mentor, ask them gazillions of questions, because you never know what you're going to need. You never know when it's going to come in handy. When I was in school, I didn't have to edit because we had professional editors. Our equipment was so expensive. Yes, I'm going back to the 80s. You guys weren't even here yet. But we didn't really, the editors edited. We didn't have to do that per se. So I had exposure to it, but I wasn't actually doing it. However, at MSNBC, working with the webcast team, we were a small group. We were 4 people, and I got to do editing, and then I learned Avid, and then I was out shooting my own things because you're small staffed, and we had the creative abilities to go and do that, and not a lot of people breathing down our back saying it has to be this or it has to be that. It was like, ooh, that's interesting, go.
Yeah.
So we did. But the more exposure you have to all aspects also gives you more of an appreciation for the people that you're working with.
Yes.
So you're not demanding and saying, hey, I need this now, when you know somebody's working on a piece and you know it hasn't been set into the system yet and it hasn't been converted and nobody's had time to work on it. So I think it just gives you a better appreciation of what you're doing and respect for the other people you work with.
Definitely, yeah. You know how to do it all, which is so great. And college is such a great experience to get that opportunity and practice. So I totally agree with that. And can you walk us through your day-to-day as an anchor and as a senior producer?
I'll start with producing.
Okay.
Because that was a while ago, but that was actually really what I love to do.
Oh.
So my mornings would start with checking my emails,
Yep.
checking the headlines,
I'm with you on that one.
seeing what I missed, catching up on the day. And when I would get to the office, I was usually the first one in, so it was nice and quiet, and just go through, the shows, the hot lists, what's been, the top headlines, and then my beat was more Today Show oriented, which were the fun videos and things that we knew would get a lot of clicks on the website, and then the international aspect of it, because cable wasn't really covering international news. So what they had on their regular shows was already up on the internet, so we had to find the things in between. So I would go scrubbing through all things out of China, where there was always a good video. And I say good, shouldn't be really good, but somebody was hanging off of a balcony or somebody was being caught. Kind of strange videos that we don't really have a lot of them here, but CCTV was always a wealth of good videos. But also, it sort of kept our hand in the international world. One of the things with the news business is we become very domestically centric and forget that there's another world out there, and there really is, and it impacts everything we do.
Yeah.
So that was always fun. And then, just balancing the newscast. We did a show called Video Headlines, which was about 4 minutes. And in that 4 minutes, which we updated every hour, we would try to get, like a regular newscast. Here's the hard news, here's what's going on around the world, maybe sports or something else you need to know about, and then a fun kicker.
Oh, wow. That sounds fun. And then as an anchor, I know you have a very busy schedule. You woke up at 3:30 this morning, right?
Oh, I woke up at 2.
2.
My in time was 3:30 because at News 12 now, our morning show starts at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Wow, that is early.
So yes, it's very interesting. And what I try to do for myself is we don't have hair and makeup there. Okay. Totally spoiled at NBC because they do it for you. So I can walk in
nice.
looking like a drowned rat, and it didn't matter. But now, COVID also taught me be able to do it yourself too.
Yes.
So I do it now before I go, because once I get to the studio, sometimes you just never know what you're walking into, and I just like to be prepared for that.
Definitely.
So any extra time I have, I don't want to be spending it in front of a mirror, curling my hair or fixing my lips. It's just not the way I want to spend my time. So yes, I put eyelashes on at about 2:15 in the morning. It's wake up, cold water, contacts in, and then the eyelashes go like that. And, and then so by 3:30 when I get to the studio, I have coffee in me and I'm ready to rock and roll. And at 4:45 usually, I head into the studio. It's different because we use iPads and laptops only. We're paperless, which is a huge transition for me.
Yeah,
I'm used to, having that script in my hand at all times, and also a pen because you're writing down thoughts, or if you're interviewing somebody, you're listening to what they're saying and you're working on your next question. And I don't have that now, which is it's a very different feeling, but I still have to log in, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and
So you have an iPad with you on the desk? Or
on the desk I have a laptop.
Okay.
And then there's an iPad which I can take because they move us all around the set. We have a back monitor, we have a curve monitor, we have the weather wall. So we're talking to the weatherman, and then we do walk-in talks on certain stories. So if it's a top story, and then the videos or the pictures will appear beside you.
Okay, yeah.
So it's very busy. And the first show's at 5, and then we do the second show at 5:30, and then 6, and then 6:30, and then 7, 7:30, and then 8 through 8:30. And
busy day.
it is. And if there's any breaking news, then we just continue and do the top of the A block, 9, 9:30 through whenever, whenever it's sort of solved or quiet enough to walk away from for a bit.
Yeah. And you kind of touched on it, but could you talk about how the industry changed from when you first started out to now?
It's completely different, is the best way to put it. When I started, trying to think of a nice way to put this. When I started in the business, I would say it was 95% male, and the women who worked so incredibly hard. And I remember I was working up at ABC, I worked on Nightline, and we did the show from New York, but Ted Koppel was our anchor, and he was in DC. So we would literally feed the show down so he could be live at 11:30 after the newscasts, which were 11 to 11:30. And I remember being there with producers, and sometimes news would change at 10 o'clock at night, and we would shift the entire show. I say 10. Sometimes it was 11 o'clock, and we would shift the entire show. And I'd hear the 3 or 4 producers and the editors saying, okay, honey, yeah, I know I'm not going to be home tonight. All right, well, hopefully I'll get to see you tomorrow. And they were talking to their children and their spouses. And I thought, I'm never going to be that person. How could they do that? Oh, this is too much. And I'd come back in the next day. I was a college student. I got to go home and come back. And they'd be, brushing their teeth in the ladies' room because it had been overnight. And then day 2, they'd be making the same phone call to their families. Some of the guys got to go home, They didn't because the ambition and the need to prove yourself was so much more for them. In that way, that part of the industry has changed. I think now there's so many more women in the workforce.
Definitely.
It's incredibly fantastic.
Very refreshing.
And companies are much more lenient that way. It's not as hardcore. You have to be here. It's like, no, you have maternity leave, you get to go. Or you have an issue with your child, you get to leave now. They're much more understanding.
Yes.
And I think journalism also has changed, and I say this story-wise because there's just so much more everywhere. I feel that news has gotten to a saturation point.
Definitely, yeah, I can see that.
And it's very difficult to figure out where you actually get news from and where you get the facts from and the facts that affect your life. And I often ask this when I'm talking to people your age, that where do you get your news? You don't listen to televisions, right? Where do you get your news from?
Social media.
Social media. TikTok,
a lot on social
Reddit,
media.
All those different sites which did not exist when I started in the business. It was, your newscast. And then cable news came on and changed that environment to, 24/7. Everybody was rolling and there were stories. So you also didn't have the same amount of time to work on the stories. And I think that kind of changed the way we told the story. Not all the parts are there. All the research wasn't done. And now we have bloggers, and we have real news, we have fake news, we have news everywhere,
Yeah.
And I have a 91-year-old mother who loves Fox News and loves to tell me about the headlines because it's all truth. And I have to say, Mom, where did you get that story from? Well, I just saw it. And I was like, well, did you read it on the bottom? Was it an actual story? What's the thing? So we have this debate a lot in my household of where you get your news and is it factual and is it truthful? And
yeah. No, it's so scary with all the overload of fake news and you don't know what to trust. But I think that's why someone in your position is so respected, because you put in the work and you find the stories and are able to involve the community and give back and give reliable information, which is really rewarding.
Well, one of the things I was taught, and this goes back to my college days, my professor is, if you have a fact, you check it, and then you check it again, and then you check it again. And
good
that
advice.
before you do it. And I see things slide by now all the time because, you know, like many news stations in many places, they're always understaffed. People call out, you have somebody covering for somebody else's job, and things fall through the cracks.
Yeah.
And it's due diligence, but you have to check it, and you just can't take what's coming across your feed as correct.
Definitely, that is
without checking.
so important to keep in mind always. And going back to social media, but more of a positive way, how important do you think it is to use social media to be able to promote yourself and land a job?
Those are two different things.
Okay.
So the social media, I do respect it. I remember when I had to sign up for Facebook when it first started, and sign up for Twitter when it first started, because being on the .com side, that was our media, and so started building it for there. I am not a self-promoter. I am not, click, look what I'm doing. I'm not of that generation. And also I have children, so I tend to be a little more private in that if I don't want things always being out there of where I am and what I'm doing and who I'm speaking with. But social media is a huge part of the network now and moving stories forward, because not everybody gets their news from the same place. So if we have something on TV, we're always pushing it now to social media, whether it's from a news blast from News 12 or one of the anchors is like, hey, I covered this story, click smile. It happens all the time. Social media is great when you're promoting yourself for what you are doing, using it for a job, and this is where you guys have to walk that fine line, is understanding that once things are out there, it's out there. Once it's written, it's out there. So, and I tell my kids this too, you know, emails, whatever you're writing, make sure you are comfortable going to have to go back and revisit that at some point and stand by it, because once you put it out in the universe, you don't get a chance to change that. And you are in a different position with your age group, because there is so much social media going out there where anybody who wants to interview you can just, boom, I'm just going to do a check, and here you are, and oh wow, oh look. And I've had people lose jobs because, you know, they're at a spring break party in a bikini doing things they're not supposed to be doing, and they're not going to get the same respect as somebody who actually really does monitor their social media accounts. But to your point with social media, I was talking with some of the younger producers that I work with, and I said, what would you, telling me coming out of college, what would you be telling a class coming out now? And one of the things they spoke of was using social media to network and to really seriously not be shy with getting up on LinkedIn, sending out your resumes, poking people, staying in contact, reaching out, because it's not so face-to-face anymore. You're not going to run into people in the elevator like I used to do. Hey, what are you doing? Oh, great, send me your resume. Boom, here, I'm in your office, I get the job. It's very different now. So they really said to encourage you all to use social media for that and to continue networking with it.
Yeah, it's such a big part of the job process, I feel like now. And similar to that, hosting reels. I'm sure you have one, and I just want to know the typical length that you would recommend, and well, we'll start with that.
Reels are different. My first reel, just makes me kind of laugh when I go back to it, because I had a reel in college, which it was the stories I had done, you know, silly things like, this is my story on circles and all the different things we found with circles and the interviews. And, you know, you do get a reel coming out of college, and it's very important that you have something tangible. Not necessarily to be judged on for how great you were or what you did, but more to see your flexibility, more to see your handling of situations and the potential that comes out of a reel. It is important to spend time doing it. My first reel, because I was sort of in between the hosting aspects of it, which was more entertainment side, and the journalistic aspect of it, which was the actual reporting, was I think I had American Woman was my theme music. So yeah, Lenny Kravitz rocked me on as I was putting my different spots together.
Nice.
It was great. It was so much fun. And I remember taking that to, I guess it was MSNBC, a point, or just showing somebody my reel at that point, and they looked at me and they went, okay, we got to redo this. I was like, that's fine, but it got me in the door. It was different, and it had all the different things. I had done interviews for HBO, so I had the interview part. I didn't have the breaking news that I really needed for a hard news anchor position. And actually, ironically, when I interviewed with MSNBC, through a former professor, connections, that was the way it was all networking. The woman who I spoke with said, well, I liked your reel, and it was great, and you have a great resume, but you're just not going to be an anchor on our air.
Really?
Yeah. Fine, everybody has an opinion. And I went, oh, okay. Well, what would you recommend I do to get to that spot? And of course, it's go to a smaller market, get your reel grittier, really get more of being out in the field and doing interviews, which she then followed up with, but by the way, we have this webcast team that you might be interested in. And that was my door to going back into journalism. And I actually took the job on the webcast team. Two amazing people were running it as an associate producer. And I said, I don't care what I'm doing. I just want to get back in the field. I don't care if I'm ever on television again. Seriously, I said that. Just let me do this. So I went in as an associate producer and started, writing for the webcasts and, getting back into a computer system, which when I first started at ABC, our computer system was massive. We didn't really even have desktops. It was that behind the times. And so learning that whole new system, and I started in February. By April, I was producing, filling in for my producer who had gone on vacation. And then we decided to produce a second show. So I produced we had a show called Business Headlines. And by August, I was on air, filling in on weekends, anchoring for MSNBC, because one of my EPs, I was playing my reel for somebody, went, wait, that's you? And I said, yeah. And he said, you do that too?
Wow.
Because he didn't know me as that. He knew me as an associate producer and as a writer and running tapes, literally running tapes from one section to another out of broadcast news is no joke. Guys, if you've not seen it, watch it. It's really a great movie. And so that's where, and then he threw me on air. And I went, okay.
Yeah.
And then I started doing more of that. And then it just sort of, I kept my job with MSNBC.com, and then I became their anchor and producer, and then with MSNBC, and then I went to NBC, and then I did the Today Show and all those different things. So it worked out.
Yeah.
And I always say I fell into a rose bush or whatever you want to call it. But fortunately, I had the skills, and I had people behind me who believed that I could do it versus the woman in cable who said I couldn't do it. And I'm one of those, when you tell me you can't do something, I say, oh, okay. And then I figure out how to do it, because that's my generation. Also, of if they tell you can't do it, no way, there's gonna be a way, and I'm gonna figure it out, I'm gonna do it.
That's great. You didn't stop at that one no, because look where you ended up, because the right person saw your reel. So that's very important. Don't just stop if you get a no.
Well, it's also, that wasn't my intention. Anchoring was I was in broadcast, this is what I do, I'm always on TV, that's what I'm gonna do. And when the associate producer came up, that's fine, I'll segue, because it gave me a chance to get the other background in, which is
Yeah.
what you were talking about in the beginning of getting my hands into something else, learning a different system, writing. And I still remember writing a script and having it come out of the anchor's mouth going, oh, it's really cool. She said what I wrote. This is awesome.
Yeah.
And there's a whole process to that. But I learned, about editing. And I was sitting in the edit bays. And then I was directing. And I'm sitting in the back of the control rooms, my free time, because I wanted to learn and soak it all in.
Yes, yeah.
Great opportunities.
Definitely, yeah. So could you touch a little bit on your transition from college right into MSNBC?
Okay. So this is where it gets a little wonky.
Okay.
I love that word, wonky. So I graduated from NYU in broadcast journalism and a double major in Japanese. It was the first year they had been offering it, and I had worked in Japan prior years
that's really
doing
cool.
shows over there, and I had a few albums over there, and so they taught us phonetically, and I didn't think that was enough for me, so I wanted to know exactly what I was saying. And that's when I learned Japanese, so I was doing both of those. And then I started graduate work at NYU. And while I was doing that, I was working at ABC's Nightline, which was fantastic. To that point, too, make sure you use your career boards here. I know a lot of people go, oh, it's a career board. It's not really going to help. Do it. Find out what they're advertising, find out what the jobs are. Really, it is very, very helpful. I got my
Yeah.
internship through school.
Oh.
So
yeah,
they set me
perfect.
up with ABC, and I went in Nightline as an intern, and then got hired as a desk assistant, and it was fantastic.
Yeah.
And then I didn't finish my graduate degree, which back then was not a big deal because I was already working in the field.
Yeah.
And I said, okay. And I jumped ship and I just got the job and I started working with Nightline. Well, then I got a tour and my contract was up and I was like, okay. Well, then I went back on tour, and that's when I started toggling between, getting a freelance job, working
Yes.
with a local news like Local News 5 or something, and then going back on the road because I could.
Yeah.
For me, I was young. I didn't have I wasn't attached to a family. My responsibilities were different. I had a backpack. Whoosh, see ya, I was gone. So it took a while to get me back into the writing aspect of it, because when I did go off on that road after college, also, my voice now still, to me, when I hear it, I sound like I'm 16.
Really?
When I graduated college, I was doing voiceovers for Trick cereal
Ooh, that's cool.
and still acting as a 16 and 17-year-old because I looked so young. And there was no way anybody was going to hire me as an on-air reporter when I looked like I was still in middle school. And I knew that. So being a desk assistant was great,
Yeah.
But there was no way I was going to transition into any kind of field position the way I looked and the way I sounded. So I had to kind of mature into that, and that happened a lot with doing those infomercials and working for companies and, figuring things out that way, working the camera on the other side.
Okay.
So I did my last tour in '98. I know, it's crazy when I think about this time frame. 96, I was actually down at the Algonquin doing Sugar Babies. 96 or 97, I was over here at Monmouth doing Dames at Sea with Woody, which is now the Woody's Theater. It was the Guggenheim
yes.
back when I was here. And backstory to that, I got that job because I was riding the bus back and forth with Woody, and just happened to be sitting next to him one day talking about what was going on. And he was like, oh, yeah, I'm really upset. What's going on? Oh, I just lost my lead. She can't do the show. I got to find somebody who can sing and dance. We open in 2 weeks. Well, hi, Woody, guess what? And he looked at me and went, wait a minute. because he only knew me from doing commercials. He had no
Yeah.
idea I could sing and dance too. And 2 weeks later, we opened. So again, talk to people.
Yes,
Opportunities
network.
are there. There are no dumb questions. It's amazing opportunities out there to do that. But anyway, back to your question. And then I did an SVU for Law and Order, and that was actually that was my last acting job. Got married and went, all right, I'm not going on tour anymore. I better, get a real job. And journalism was my real job to me. So that's when I went back to, I got the job at MSNBC, which was, I spoke to my old professor and I'm like, how do I get back into this? Where am I supposed to go? And she goes, oh, you know so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. And just through those phone calls and through networking and reworking my resume and having a reel, it just opened doors.
Yeah, definitely.
So I hopped back in.
Yeah, and you have so much experience in so many different fields, which is very cool. So you have a lot of connections, and your time at NYU, you seem to really utilize and just get connections, make reels, get content for your reels. And going back on that, so if you have no real life experience for your reels, is it good to kind of simulate news content?
I was just going to say, you guys could so easily, especially in this forum, you have the facilities here. You can do anything you need for your reel. It doesn't matter who you're interviewing. You don't have to land the star to do a good interview. You can sit somebody in this chair and have, you guys film it and you have something. You have something tangible and something you can throw up on the web. Cut it, snip it, even do a flash reel where it's just a little bit of this and a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and put it together. Nobody knows whether it was a 20-minute interview or a 2-minute interview.
Yeah.
Unless they're going to ask you, and hopefully they will ask you because that means you're sitting in front of them.
That's true. That is
so,
true.
You have these options here to use them. So take advantage of this. This is the best time of your lives. This is the coolest time.
You're right about that.
And for you to be soaking in everything that, Monmouth can give you, because you have amazing professors and you have access to everything, and you have access to their brains and their education and their guidance. That brings me to another thing that I asked the producers about, and this one girl, Gabby, who was a Montclair graduate, said, tell them to ask questions about everything and then tell them it's going to be okay.
Oh, I like that.
And I looked at her, I went, what do you mean it's going to be okay? And she said, when you're in school, you have the net. You can go to a teacher and say, oh, this isn't what I wanted, or this isn't right, how do I fix that? You still have those options when you're in the workforce, because you will have colleagues that you can ask, and they're going to understand there's a learning curve to getting into it no matter what job you take. And that applies to any industry. But to understand that, when you go out there, you're not alone in this new position. You have all this experience behind you, and you have people, you have lifelines that you can call on to help you if you have questions about things, and to not be so frightened about it, because you have the tools. You've been taught the tools. You've had an amazing education here, and your biggest challenge is going to be trying to figure out how you can translate your skills here into the job opportunities that you want to go for. And your skills will translate. You will never know what you're suddenly going to pull out of your pocket and go, oh my gosh, I remember we were in this class and this is what we had to do. Bingo, that's going to come in handy when you find yourself in that situation in a newsroom or an office or some marketing class or job, that you have these skills and you'll pull them and you'll use them.
No, that's great advice, and it's so important to just utilize all the resources you have at school, because we have the studio, we have great professors in the department, so.
And you also have each other.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
And today you
yeah.
guys can go out and shoot anything with an iPhone. Hello.
Yeah, we have a class here, smartphone video production.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, we used to haul the cameras, and part of what we did freshman year in college was we had to work with the master's programs. So when people were doing their theses and going out on shoots, we were the crew. So you had to go do, audio. You had to go help with the camera. You had to lug the stuff, the lights and everything else.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Which now it's like, okay, stand here. Here's your flip phone. Yeah, great. Oh, I gotcha. Boom, done. And then you can edit it, and in 5 minutes you send it off. It's amazing.
It is. It truly is.
So that has changed a lot.
Yes. So I have one more final question before I open it up to the audience. But what advice would you give to your college self, or just do you have any other advice that you'd like to share with us?
Ooh, my college self. My college self was living in the village in the 80s, which is
that sounds exciting.
It is exciting. And interesting point, I just had, I actually teach public speaking at Brookdale, and one of my students was doing this informative speech about punk rock. And like, back in the history of punk, and I'm sitting in the back going, no, it's not history, it's punk. I mean, I lived at CBGB's, and we had the Cat Club and St. Mark's Place. When people really did, that was their garb, the long coats and the spiky hair and the different colors. And, I still have my original Betsy Johnsons, which was just so much a part of that time frame. And I loved every second of it. And I love the memories of it. But going back to job, going back now, I would have stayed in school. I would have finished, even if it took me a lot longer to get my degree, because those things nowadays just mean so much more in terms of education. There is something to be said for actually your work experience.
Yeah.
But nowadays there's so many more people in the workforce that if you have anything that's going to give you an extra leg up, you need to take it. And it would have. With the Japanese, I had 10 credits for a teaching degree. I was like, I'm never going to teach.
Here we are.
Here we are. And I could have taught Japanese as well as English or any other thing I wanted to do. I was like, okay, well, no, I have different ambitions. And no, looking back, that would have been sitting down with an advisor and seriously heeding their advice.
Yeah, that is good advice.
Well, but you never know when you're going to use it too. But life does change, and the other side to that is the opportunities were amazing. And taking that job at Nightline, when I said, okay, I'm going to take the job, and it was full time, I didn't really have the time to go to school because I was also still doing voiceovers and doing commercials and taking a day off. So I already had those two careers. But flash forward to 2000, what year was this? So we went from 1987. Yes, 1987 to, I'd say, probably 2014. And I'm sitting at the anchor desk, and this gentleman walks by, and I looked up, I went, hey, Rick. And he looked at me, he went, oh my God. And he said, I knew you would be sitting there one day.
Wow.
And he had been the EP at Nightline, Rick Kaplan.
Wow.
And I spent more time going to get his dinner and bringing it back every night from Café des Artistes, but having great conversations about, the content of the shows. And here we were, full circle, and he was my boss again.
Wow.
So very cool. And that happens. This is a very, very small world.
It is. It really is.
There are so many networks. There's so many jobs out there. There's so many different things you can do. But boy, is this a small world. You are going to know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody, and you're going to bump into them. Oh, and the other piece of advice was make sure you do not burn any bridges.
That is a big one, yes.
And I
That's good
remember looking,
advice.
I'm like, what do you mean burn bridges? She goes, well, you know, sometimes you're in school and there's a person that irritates you, or, you know, maybe you don't get along with them. And then 3 years later, they're sitting next to you and you're going, okay, you know?
Yeah.
It's you don't know who you're going to see again. You don't know what capacity they're going to be in. Because if you're in the industry, it's a very, very small world.
It is. You never know who you're going to end up with, and that's crazy that your boss saw you all those years later and said, I knew you were going to be sitting there.
Well, I'm sitting here and I'm looking out and I'm thinking, okay, in 2-3 years, you guys are going to be sitting with me at News 12, you know, in whatever capacity, I don't know. Maybe it's a cameraman, maybe it's, you know, a producer or an associate producer, or now we have these MMJs, which are, you know, our multimedia journalists, and they're one-man bands. But, you know, we're all in it together.
We are. That is
And
true.
yeah, but another point is I love working with you guys. I'm learning so much, especially out of college, because your knowledge is, you know, you learn things here that took me a lot longer to learn in the field. But what's fascinating is the conversations. And I'm now in a position where I can actually help my producers.
Yeah.
You know, if they can't figure out how to segue something, well, they'll say, how do you do it? I'm like, okay, well, you've got this and you can't move that there and you can't do this. And perfect example was somebody was doing a story about the ice skating rink, because there's an ice skating rink up at, I think it's the American Dream Mall. One of those places.
Probably.
And they were just doing hey, it's a local thing, we're going to go ice skating. And one of the teases was, okay, we're going to show you how to strap on your skates. I'm like, no, we don't strap them on. We tie them up, we lace them up. You're not strapping on anything, and you're not saying that on air. But it's just those kinds of things that, seasoned, that's a good word for it. You're seasoned, and if I saw that coming across the prompter and I had not caught it before, I would immediately edit that in my head. So the things that you guys use in your vernacular, you don't always understand that there might be another meaning if it's coming out to a broader audience in things.
Yeah. That's why it's so important to work as a team, and that's why we're so grateful to be talking to you today and just getting your expertise. And now I'd like to open it up to the audience for questions.
Possibly do. So if you're tired, oh well, flip the switch, make it happen, and be there. That is your job. And I was trained that way. So if you're 12 and you're tired, oh well, get up and do it.
Yep.
And that translates now, because here I am at 2 o'clock in the morning getting up and I'm getting my eyelashes on, and I don't, my concept of being tired and stopping, even doing the newscasts time after time, or you know, breaking news, the longest I was in the chair by myself was 6 hours in a room by myself.
6 hours?
6
Jeez.
hours. I didn't even get to go to the restroom. I had a water bottle next to me. It was a crazy time in the studio.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But it's the energy. You know, you're in it, and you keep your energy up, and you don't get tired at the end of the day. I mean, you do,
Can't show
but
it.
you can't show it.
Yep.
And that really is transferable from any kind of, not even performing, but just doing a job. You know,
Yeah.
you go with that energy, you're going to do it and do the best you can. And, you know, what's that tag out? Never let them see you sweat.
Yep.
It's part of that too, you know, and
Yeah.
you just don't get tired, because even with our newscasts, you know, people are watching it for the first time.
Yeah.
You know, you might be tired of the story. Lord knows I get tired of the story.
I'm sure.
Talk New Jersey over and over and over sometimes. It's like, we told you about this 2 weeks ago. And yeah, I remember telling you about it 2 weeks ago. But somebody's hearing it for the first time.
Yeah.
And it's your job to relay that with as much, you know, enthusiasm and authority and energy as you did the first time.
Yeah, that's a huge skill that transfers over. So.
And being disciplined and
Yes.
being responsible. You know, knowing your lines is a big thing. Knowing your audience, huge. That is a huge takeaway, I think, in any regard, whether you're performing or whether you're doing your newscasts, you need to know your demographic. You need to know who you're speaking to. Very different conversations when you're talking to people your age versus a group of 75-year-olds.
Yeah.
You know, that it's just different. Or you're talking to a camera solely. You know, it's you just learn to sort of make those adjustments, and it's an understanding, but that also comes with time.
Yeah, definitely. Know your audience. That's
and practice,
great advice. Practice, yes.
Practice.
Definitely.
If you want to learn how to say something, even with your stand-ups, if you guys are doing reels and you want to know or you know have a good lead-in, practice saying it. See what works.
Yeah.
I read my scripts out loud all the time. You know, tongue twisters come in the oddest places sometimes, and you don't know why you get tripped up on something, or maybe there are too many numbers. But it's my job to get them to you correctly.
Yeah.
So I have to know that I can do that before I read it for you.
Definitely. Practice is key. All right. Any other questions? Luca?
So obviously live broadcasting, the unexpected can occur. So can you talk about a time where you've adjusted on the spot, just say maybe a technical mistake, or maybe you were told the wrong information, how you just dealt with that situation?
That happens a lot. Happened this morning. One of the things is, you know, with the morning shows, sometimes we're shorthanded, sometimes we're not. It's tough to call out at 3:30 in the morning. So if people do, you make do with what's going on. So we don't always have prompter. Or sometimes it stops. Or like yesterday, we didn't have it, and my colleague was scrolling for us and hit the wrong button, and we just went to a completely different rundown. I was like, okay, well, here we go. You know, but I knew the story that was coming next. I had the iPad. You know, I'm kind of set up in that way to catch up. And it is live television. You know, nobody is expecting you to be perfect. And that's another thing is we're not perfect. Nobody's perfect at anything they do. You can be good and you can try to do your best, which is really the most that you can do and give it, but nobody's going to be perfect. So there are situations where you get stuck on a word and, you know, you can't get it out. And sometimes you roll with it, sometimes you fix it, and sometimes it just becomes a big joke. And it's live television, what are you going to do? You hope you do get a chance to fix it the next time so you say it right. But the reality of it is it's live television, and we've had cameras go down, we've had tables shift while we're speaking, prompters go down. I've been on air when people have changed the rundown on me and not told me. And I'm reading from one script and they're like, okay, you're in the wrong, like, no, I'm in what we were in. And I go, oh, well, we switched to the new one. Well, when were you going to tell me that? Okay. You have 30 seconds before, you know, we're at a commercial. Switch it. All right. So go back and fix the prompter up so at least you're on the same page. Those things happen all the time, but that happens in life too. You can kind of stay on top of those things. Like, I very rarely work without the iPad because I know the prompter isn't always reliable. And I don't want to be stuck, you know, deer in the headlights, switching or saying, hey, Nick, you want to take this story and, you know, toss it around. I just prefer to be more prepared like that. But things happen. And the more that happens and the more you know what you're supposed to be doing, it's just kind of, you roll with it. And people are forgiving. You know, as long as you're not really calling out the wrong elections. That's what you don't do wrong.
That would be pretty bad.
You know, those are things where you really can't be wrong.
Just don't do that, you'll be fine.
But that's part of the process. But, you know, to your point, I remember times when I was doing Gypsy and they rolled out the set and I was on stage with Angela Lansbury and the refrigerator fell over. It wasn't a refrigerator, it was a fake refrigerator, you know, and her comment was, oh, wow, geez. Just nothing's made to last anymore, is it? You know, and we continued doing the show. When I was doing Annie, the dog, we had two dogs, and the one backstage, and this is never like a really fun story to tell, but was not feeling well in the wings. And I was on stage all by myself saying, okay, dog, come on, Sandy. Hey, come on over here. And the dog, they're going, wait, you know. So I was 12 and vamping for about 4 minutes before they got the understudy dog up the elevator and back out on stage, and there we go. You know, things happen. You do the best you can.
Things happen, you just gotta roll with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, we have time for one more question. Anyone? Yes.
Hi, I wanted to go back to your performance experience, and I'm thinking about in our department, you know, I teach performance-based courses, and there's a voice and diction class that includes the International Phonetic Alphabet, at least an introduction to it. And I wonder if you feel like with your performance work, your theater work, that you learned how to really control your voice, your articulation, activating your body. I find that often college students, that they really need to work on, their articulation, the way they use their volume, their diaphragmatic breathing, all of those kinds of things.
I completely agree with you. There are times, in fact, this morning I was in a story that I didn't think was ever going to end. You know, so you stop, you take the deep breath, and you're breathing from your diaphragm because you have, this long run-on sentence that you didn't get to edit before it's in front of you, and you're just still talking, and you're keeping up the energy and going with that. The diction, definitely, from just years and years of speaking. I mean, I literally speak for a living in every capacity, whether it was singing or doing the voiceovers or what I'm doing now. I would forever love to change the pitch of my voice and get it lower, because I think that would be so much better. I can't. I can within reason, but I really can't change that section of my voice. But whenever there are crazy names or really long words, I get those stories. And I think a lot of that came from the Iraq War. A lot of that came from MSNBC when things were changing very quickly. And, we had a general here and a general there, and then we were looking for this person and that person and all these crazy names that you wouldn't normally see. It wasn't Joe, Mary, and Bill. We had Muhammad and Musam and all these different names. And same thing when you're dealing with China. Anytime there's a foreign import, I've spent so much time in those words, using those vocabularies, that I don't really think about it when it's coming across the prompter anymore. It just sort of innately comes out, but that comes from practice. That comes from reading in other languages. That comes from seeing something going, wow, I don't know how to say that. Like today, pluviophile. Anybody know what a pluviophile is? Someone who loves rain, right? I'm like, what? Wait, pluve, Latin root, pluvere. Okay, that makes sense. You break it down. Had no idea what that word meant. Now the whole office knows, because I'm like, hey guys. Things like that. But you do the homework and you practice it and you say it over and over and over, and you record yourself saying it. You hear yourself saying it over and over.
Yeah, definitely. Great question. And that wraps it up. I want to thank you again so much for joining us. It's so nice hearing professional insight from someone who's so successful and talented like yourself. And thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Bryn Casey, and take care.